Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Krav and Coffee. We're going to give it a couple minutes to see who will be popping on with us. So, good morning, Heather. How are you? Hey, Katie, Ernie, Kevin, what's up? Grab your coffee, get comfy. I'm going to get my camera better. So let me just hide this. There you go. So last week, and I believe the week before, the week before it didn't work very well. But last week I started putting up a kind of like a very rudimentary PowerPoint. That's the word I'm looking for, to help you kind of follow through. And if I say something that really like catches your ear, that you have that right in front of you to kind of write down and look up for later. Good morning, Kim. Hope everybody's doing well. The weather here in Philly is awesome. It's beautiful out, but the pollen is no joke. So you'll have to excuse the congestion. Gotta love those seasonal allergies. So, good morning, Des. How are you? All right. So, in true Anne style, so I get inspired and I want to do things to make the world better. It's kind of just the way I am. So I have been thinking about how we can truly educate people about self-protection, particularly women. It's kind of my focus, but men, you can follow this too. There are different threats for men versus women. And I guess my mission is to make sure that when women are taught how to protect themselves, they're taught as a specific demographic with specific issues. Not just, I'm going to teach you the way I teach everybody else, and you have to, analyze it and figure it out on your own. Because as women, we really do, we face different threats, and we face different marketing. Hey, Michael, how are you? Michael Harris, I haven't heard from you in a while. I'm thinking of you and praying for you. I know that it's been a rough month for you. We'll catch up. Alan Garcia, welcome. Kim, welcome. Megan, welcome. Heather Cronin, how are you? Went to PT school with Heather. So just a little bit of housekeeping, guys. I am starting a public figure education Facebook page to kind of separate my professional from my private life. As much as I'm sure all of you think that my family is amazing, you don't want to see those pictures when you're trying to find some good information about women's self-defense. So please feel free to visit my Facebook page, Anne LaGrady Kirk, DPT, and that'll be where that'll be like the education hub for me, for all things women's self-protection, for Krav Maga Universal. You can find it there. If you're local and you train at Kirk's Martial Arts and Krav Maga, if you're interested in the women's side, it'll all be there. If you know me personally and you're interested in the women's self-protection, physical therapy services, kettlebell services, you can get it all at my page. So Anne LaGrady Kirk, DPT. I love Ernie and we're still fine. The reason I'm putting the LaGrady in is because my license is under Anne LaGrady. If anyone wants to look me up and make sure my PT license is valid, If you look up Ann Kirk, you won't find it. So you have to look up Ann LaGrady. So I gave everybody both names, but don't be concerned. Ernie and I are a-okay. Hey, Mom. Okay. So with that housekeeping done, I also want to say that this has been a roller coaster of preparation for this talk. I had an idea in mind on Monday that got me so excited that I called a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, and I'm like, let's collaborate. Let's do this. We figured it out. And then as I started doing more research and pulling it apart, I'm like, maybe we haven't figured it out quite yet. Maybe what I thought on Monday really isn't the best thing to do. So by Thursday evening, after talking to the original Wonder Woman, Katie Stoffelbach, I was like, okay, we're going to tap the brakes on the original idea and revisit it. And then take some of the concepts that were still kind of good, and we're going to use that for Sunday's talk. So if I appear disjointed and maybe a little bit nervous, that's why, because I like being prepared. It's kind of it's my safety blanket. Like, all right, here's my lesson plan. Going by the seat of my pants is something I do frequently, but not the thing that I like to do the most. All right, so we are about, I'll give one more minute to get everybody in and comfortable. Good morning, Jerry. Good morning, Navette. Good morning, Amon. Very good to see all you guys on. So let's see here. I am going to do a little tech work on my end. Oh, would you look at that? And I am going to get my screen share here so that you guys can kind of follow along with me. All right, so the theme around today's talk is the timeline. Timeline. What does that mean? Timeline. So when does our awareness transition to action? Right? What do? We can't just avoid every problem. And there are case studies and articles and businesses that rely on the fact that we will have to act at some point when it comes to self-defense. As much as we want to be aware, observe our surroundings, remove ourselves from any issues, there are times where the predator has selected you as their prey, and they're kind of good at their job. So what can you do about it? So there's this thing called the OODA loop, OODA. And the OODA loop was coined by an Air Force colonel and a military strategist named John Boyd. And the way that he describes it is you need to observe your surroundings. Once you've observed them, you have to orient to them. Once you've oriented to what's going on, you need to decide how you're going to react, act, engage, whatever. And then you have to do it. And I would say that deciding to act is, in my opinion, the hardest thing to do, because you get like that fast feet. You're like, oh, do I stay or do I go? Do I have enough time to exit? Do I have enough room to leave? If I need to engage, am I overreacting? But you have to, that's where like the confidence building and the training kind of builds into how to keep yourself safe. Because if you're not taking action, then action is being taken on you. Okay, so you're behind the 8 ball. You never want to be blocking in self-defense. You're already behind. they're throwing punches and you're blocking. So you want to make sure that you have that mindset of, if we got to go, we're going to go, and we're going to go as much on my terms as possible. Now, if you have a lot of time, then you can kind of work out, you can write your pro and con list. Do I want to engage? Do I not want to engage? Is this person really bad or are they not? Can I de-escalate? What do I need to hit if I need to hit? If I carry a weapon, can I deploy it? So the more time you have, the more you can think about what you need to do. The less time you have, the quicker it needs to be. So you need to train those reactions. You need to get used to making decisions. And you have to have almost a mental set of what your plan will be. And your plan should have multiple contingencies. So you don't want to just be like, I will always punch them in the throat. I will always leave. I will always go for my firearm. I will always deploy my knife. Because there are so many variables when it comes to the real world. And there are case studies and videos and articles that just continuously say that. So be mindful of being so stuck on one plan that it's hard to adjust. So for an example, as I was writing this lesson plan and this conversation, my mindset was, I'm a nail and everything looked like a nail, or I am a hammer, everything looked like a nail. Like, this is my mindset, this is my perspective. And then I talked to someone else and I'm like, holy cow, that is such a different way to look at it. Not that mine's wrong. It's just another way to look at it. So always keep in mind that mental flexibility of being able to adjust. And keep in mind that the more time you have, the more mental flexibility you will be able to use. So I heard this on Thursday, and it really hit home for me. So boundaries are what you set for yourself. Rules are what you set for other people. Now, I did a couple talks back in June of last year about boundary setting and protecting your space, being able to define your space and setting these boundaries and not letting people, test them. And I was all about that. So that was that perspective, right? I was like, this is my perspective. This is good. And then I spoke to another person who's wonderful. And she says, Anne, nobody cares about your boundaries. Those boundaries aren't theirs. Those boundaries are yours. You set rules for other people, and people can decide whether or not to follow those rules. Your boundaries don't play into that other person's, world. So let's put this into a real life context. We'll talk about the, put it into a story, I guess. So if I'm in a self-defense, self-protection situation, and there's someone approaching me, and there's like a landmark, and I'm like, okay, my line in the sand, that person is not allowed to cross that tree line. That's my boundary. If they cross that tree line, I'm leaving. I'm out of here. I have enough time to escape. I don't have to engage. I'm going to put my ego in my back pocket, and that's my boundary. If they cross the tree line. Now I can verbalize, hey, you're making me uncomfortable. Don't come any closer. And they can either comply or not comply. But that's my rule for them. Don't come any closer to me. Now, if they decide to come closer, they've broken my rule. Now, am I going to follow my boundary? Am I going to say, well, they crossed that tree line. I set my boundary for myself that if they cross that tree line, I'm out of here. Or am I going to be like, wait, no, I say get back. And then they retreat back to the tree line. Do you see how that changes? So yes, they've tested my boundary by breaking my rule. And my boundary was wishy-washy because my line in the sand was, if they cross those trees, I'm out. They crossed the trees. I gave them another chance. Do you see why I say the decision side is so hard? Because it's so, you want to think that there's the best in people. You want to think that you can handle it. And then, and you also question yourself. You're like, oh, well, they're still far enough away that I could leave if I needed to. So that's another part of the timeline, is being able to identify where in space your line in the sand is. And if that line in the sand is crossed, now it's time to act, whichever act you've decided to go with. And, escaping, leaving, if you have the option, yay, you've won your fight. You've gotten home safe. The one rule in Krav Maga, don't get hurt. You haven't gotten hurt. You've gotten in your car, you've driven away. Maybe you've made a phone call to the local police department and said, oh, there's someone that was a little bit odd, a little too close to me at the park. And, maybe that's something we should look into, So there you go on that part. Now, another thing you want to think about is how did that decision, how did that part of your environment begin to interact with you? Right. You've observed, you've oriented. Now you have to decide whether or not to engage with another person because someone has selected you. So there's a victim selection process, and there is a study that was conducted. It was back in 1981, but this study is cited over and over and over again by Grayson and Stein. And they got a bunch of criminals, incarcerated criminals, and they sat them down and they had them watch this video about just a regular street. People are walking by a busy city, and each criminal selected a similar group of people from that video. So and even when they asked, like, why did you pick those people? Some of the criminals were like, I don't know, they'd just be easy. All right. And they started to look into what kind of characteristics did all of those victims have. And some of the things that they had saw were how fast or how slow the person was walking, whether or not the person was carrying themselves with purpose, whether they were kind of like sunk down and just kind of like lollygagging around, or whether they were upright and they were walking and they were focused. They talk about whether the person was whole, like, really all together. Did they have a limp? So the way that you present, the way that you carry yourself is super important, because it's those characteristics that can make you an easier person to select. Now, once they've selected you as their victim, the next part is isolating you. So if you are in a busy park or a convenience store or something, and it's not easy to keep you quiet or keep you isolated, keep you in a spot where this aggressor isn't going to be disturbed, then they have to do more work to then move you to that second location, right? We talked about that last week, how processed predators need time and they need isolation to do what they need to do. So if you're in a crowded area, then they want to get you to a place where they can keep you more quiet, have more time to do what they need to do. If you're already in a place that's pretty quiet, where there aren't many people around, you're in the second location already, right? This is why, home invasions are so brutal, right? Because the abuser, the attacker, the assailant doesn't need to move you anywhere. They can just close the door behind them and lock it. And now you're in the comfort of your home, but it's an isolated position. Then the verbal attack starts to happen. That's where, so in our original scenario, where if I said, don't come anywhere closer to me from, stay where you are, and they start to talk their way into walking closer to me, and then I have to push them back again. That's that verbal attack, that verbal communication, that let me see how I'm going to break your rule. Let's see what happens. So they need to interview you. Think of it that way. It's an interview process. They've selected you already. They feel that something about you has made you easier to attack. They have time and space, so it's not a super crowded place. And now they're testing your rules to see how steadfast they are. The next step is the attack. So it was their timeline. They were in charge of that whole transaction. And you were just being you, walking around, maybe having a rough day, maybe being in a place that's a little bit more isolated because, hey, nowadays you can't be out in large groups. So you went for a walk because you had to get out of your house. Your mental health is a little bit dicey because we're all, in a global pandemic, and someone sees you and engages and tests those rules, tests those boundaries, and now the attack begins. So being able to deploy your weapon, deploy your training, is tough to do when the other person is controlling the timeline. You have to feel in your, that gut reaction, that awareness, the looking around where you are. That's the time that you have to save yourself, to get away. If you can't escape, if your attacker has cut off your exits, they have the means to hurt you, they have the intent to hurt you, and now the only way out is through them. Do you have what it takes to leave through them? Nothing about this part of the OODA loop is easy. And people can sell you things to make you think that it is. Even, a firearm is not easy. There's so many things. You have to be able to deploy it. You have to know what's behind it. You have to know how to use it. Hand to hand. You have to know what to hit, how many times to hit. Oh, and then by the way, they're going to be hitting you back. So when I talk about women's self-protection or anyone's self-protection, my main focus is on that observe and orient, because you have much more control, because you have much more time. Once the decision and the action have been made, there has got to be a switch inside you that you need to act. You need to aggressively save yourself. So it's tough, but it can be done. It's been done. There are, stories of these women that have fought back to save their lives. And the reason they were able to fight back to save their lives is because they decided to, and then they were ferocious when they attacked. It wasn't, well, I'm just going to do one thing. It was like, well, guess what, buddy? You're not walking out of here, because I am. Let's see here. I talked about that. All right. So you have to always remember that your attacker is active. When we train, when we watch self-defense videos, that attacker is compliant for the most part. So that's what allows instructors to demonstrate the technique. It's choreography. The bad guy will attack me this way. I will do this simple technique and I will get away safely. It has to be broken down that way when we teach so that people can understand what the technique is, how the body needs to move, what movement patterns you need. You have to start somewhere. You have to start with, when we're kids, when we write, we don't start with cursive. We don't start with these huge elaborate stories. We don't start with lesson plans, right? We learn our letters. You have to learn those letters, and you have to learn how to space them. You have to know how big they need to be. Then you start to put them into words, and then you start to understand how the words need to space out. And then you start writing sentences, and you just build and build and build and build. So that's why you want to be cautious of those quick fix self-defense scenarios. I'm going to give you this and you're going to survive. I'm going to teach you this one technique and you're going to survive. Always strike to the groin. It's more than that. It's more than that. And I think we need to say that more often as self-protection, self-defense instructors. That's the reason that we have schools and programs, because you have to do more than just bring a weapon to the fight, whether it's yourself the weapon or if you choose to carry. There's so many different weapons out there. So the one that comes to mind right away with a weapon is a firearm. Then you have blades. Then you have maybe self-defense tools such as mace or a tactical flashlight or a striking tool like a tactical pen or a taser gun, or what other things out there? The keychain that has the pointy ears. There are pros and cons to all of those tools. I by no means say go get those tools. But what I do say is if you choose to use a tool, a force multiplier in self-defense, more than just your hands and your feet, you need to understand that you have now brought a weapon to the fight. Some weapons are a little bit more dangerous than others, but those weapons, do you know how to get it out? If you carry your knife in your pocket, are you able to pull that knife out and deploy it? Are you able to hold on to it? So let's say let's talk about another tool. Let's say you have mace. And you have it out and you want to do it and you want to use it, and the bad guy comes up and the wind shifts, or he's really close and you spray him and it comes back into your face, or you miss, or he hits you and it flies out of your hand, with anything. So you no longer have that weapon if you don't have it in your hand. You don't have that weapon if it's unattainable, if you can't deploy it within the set amount of the timeline. So it could be rendered pretty useless, or in a worst case scenario, it can be used against you. And I know that a lot of self-defense tools have these mechanisms that are put in place to, if it gets knocked out of your hands, you can't use it anymore. Because I want to see both sides. I don't want to be that person who's like, don't ever use a weapon. Don't ever use your keys in self-defense. I'd rather be that person that says, so this is what this weapon can do, And this is what this weapon can't do. And if you're interested in using that weapon, you should learn how to use it. And then let you decide, because it's none of my business. But what is my business is providing you the education of how to at least see both sides of it. If it is a self-defense tool, and I am a self-defense educator, I feel, at least personally, that I should be able to teach you both sides of it. And I want to tell you a story, what started me down this road, because in the self-defense world, the self-defense tools are usually seen as very, very bad. And there's reasons behind that. But I never asked why. And I just kind of went along with it. And one self-defense thing that we urge our students against is using your keys to attack. So if you ever put your keys in between your fingers and tried to hit a bag, it doesn't feel good. If you hit really hard with those keys between your fingers and you drop them, now your keys, your means of escape are gone, and your hand hurts and you've stopped, your OODA loop has been interrupted. So there's lots of reasons why using your keys to attack your attacker is a bad idea. And then in a book called Protecting the Gift by Gavin DeBecker, who is one of the most forefront thinkers in understanding how to protect yourself. The first story in Protecting the Gift is about a woman who needed to protect her daughter. And what she ended up doing is playing out this timeline in her head. She had time. She felt the attacker stalking. She knew that he had selected her. She knew that he was in the process of allowing her to isolate. There was not necessarily the verbal attack now. That was a verbal interview process earlier on in the night. And in her head, she's planning, all right, when I get to my car, I'm going to open up my car door. I'm going to put my kid in on my car door. I'm going to make sure that when I open it, I'm going to open it with the key so that all the locks don't open. When I get into my car, I'm going to lay on my horn to draw as much attention as possible, hopefully to scare him off. Once I've laid on that horn, I'm going to put my keys in the ignition and I'm going to drive away. What had happened was, as she was getting into the car, the daughter got in safely. The attacker started grabbing at her legs, and innately she started kicking with her legs. She heard a loud sound and she didn't know what it was. Because she had planned to lay on that horn, she was on the horn. She didn't physically be like, I need to honk my horn now. It was already in her mindset that that's what she was going to do. She was kicking with her legs, and in her head, she's like, oh my goodness, I should use my key and jab it in his eye. He lets go of her. She gets her key in the ignition and she starts to go. The speed of her acceleration closes the door and he's sitting on the curb. Then she starts to recount. I did stick my key in his eye. And then when she was recounting the whole situation to Gavin DeBecker, she goes, he's lucky I didn't put the key in both eyes. Because when it comes to protecting our children, women go to the ends of the world. Here, she had stuck the key in both of his eyes. She hadn't remembered it because the situation happened so quickly, and she was just mindset on, he's taken away my exits. I need to cut through him to get to my exit. So that was a scenario where using her key in the man's eye created the time she needed to escape. So I hear that story and I'm like, oh, I don't want to tell people never to use their keys, because that just worked for that woman. But what I do need to tell people is, it wasn't like, if anyone attacks me, I'm going to stick my key in their eye. It was, I'm going to unlock my door with my key and not let any other doors unlock when I get into my car. I'm going to push my kid in next to me. I'm going to lay on my horn. I'm going to kick. I'm going to speed away. It was all of this. It was this huge plan that she had already set out in her head. And a small part of that was the key to the eye. So you have to remember that when it comes to weapons, it's not going to save your life. You are going to save your life. Same thing with your techniques. If you're hand to hand, what combatives are you going to throw? It's not one strike. You're not going to be, Mike Tyson and throw a knockout punch and be like, yeah, what? And leave. Boxers train for their livelihoods to punch, and they still miss. And you think that one self-defense class, one lesson on how to throw a strike is going to save you? No. Guys, you have to think about the big picture. You need to think about everything that needs to go into it. You owe it to yourself, if you want to learn how to protect yourself, to invest. Invest in you. Invest in your education. Don't invest in a tool that you don't use until you feel scared, and then you pull it out. Okay. Even with the tools or the combatives, you have to also keep in mind that pain is very subjective. Some people have such a high pain tolerance that, a kick to the groin or a scratch to the face isn't going to do it. Or a straight on spray of OC spray to the face isn't going to do it. Or they're tased and it isn't going to do it. You have to follow that up with something else. There needs to be more. My background is physical therapy. So a big part of what I teach is structure. How can we affect structure? And again, what's his name? Tim Larkin, for When Violence is the Answer. There's a whole chapter. I'm not sure if it's a chapter or just a portion of a chapter that goes into the range of motion of certain joints. So I can bend my elbow all the way this way, but if I extend my elbow any further than this, it doesn't go. So someone puts pressure to bend my arm further into extension than it is right now, that joint will no longer work. Structure. Whether you're a 250-pound, 6'8" man or a 90-pound, 5'4" woman, your elbow only goes that straight. And if there's a force placed on it to make it go any straighter, it will break. It will no longer work. Okay, so keep that in mind. I also think about structure in my setup. So if I'm going to, if I need to strike high line strikes, if I need to try to get this jaw strike right here to cause a concussion, and I can't reach that jaw, then I need to bring that jaw to me instead of me climbing the tree to get to it. So how can I do that? How can I bend someone in half? Can I attack their hips while I'm trying to attack their groin? I mean, it's all one, the pelvic girdle, it's all one place. Why not, instead of being so hyper-focused on, I'm going to strike them in the groin, I'm going to strike that entire section. And if I elicit a pain response that causes them to bend down, awesome. Now I'm going to strike them in the jaw because I don't want pain. I want them concussed so that I can get away safely. Or if I don't elicit a pain response, have I at least affected the structure of their body by bending them at their hip joint so that I can strike at their jaw, at their hinge joint of their jaw, and cause a concussion multiple times, multiple strikes to a high value target with something hard on me, right? You have to think about that kind of scenario, that kind of forefront planning. That's how you're going to fight for your life. That's how you're going to act. Okay. So again, observe and avoid, or you had better have a plan of how you are going to use the tool of violence. Are you okay with that? If you carry a knife, have you ever stabbed something? Stabbed something through clothes that might get the knife caught, or you have to push harder? So, have you practiced if you decided to purchase a self-defense tool? Have you practiced hitting something with it to see what it feels like? Have you practiced getting it out, having it on you? Um, so, yes. So, Kim, I saw your comment pop up. A piece of advice I've heard: if you choose to carry mace or pepper spray, it is always, or you should buy two so you have one to practice with. So there are mace trainers that you can put water in and practice with them. How far does it go? There's so many. It's like just saying, oh, just go to the gun store and buy a gun. How many different types of guns are there? What do you know about them? How do they feel in your hand? How much, how forceful are they? How well do how about that trigger pull? Same thing with mace. What kind is it? Is it OC spray? Um, is it a mist? Is it a stream? Is it a gel? How do is there a safety on it that you need to remove to use it? There's so many questions that need to be asked. And then what will it feel like if you get it on you? So I'm going to fast forward just a smidgen. So the original part of this was I really just wanted to have a conversation about how to safely retain and deploy weapons if you chose to use it, and where in the timeline that would happen, and weapons of all sorts. I am not smart enough to do that. I need help. So that talk is actually going to be a collaboration. I'm going to bring some people in who are well versed in it. And I'm actually going to test out some of the products. Obviously, I don't I don't need to cut myself because I took an offensive knife class and I did cut myself trying to deploy a folding knife. Yep. I don't carry knives. So that one's already done for me. But, talking about some other self-defense tools that are out there. I want to show you what they can do, but I also want to show you what they can't do. So that's coming, guys. It's not going to be next week. I still have to order all the stuff, but just know that that's coming. Because giving someone, here, buy this mace, it'll keep you safe, is just as irresponsible as saying, here, do this one self-defense, do this one Krav Maga technique, and you'll be safe. Not on my watch, not on my Facebook page. And I hope not on your Facebook page, guys. I hope that, if you're listening to this, it's because you really want to understand how to protect yourself, how to protect your loved ones, and not just talk a big game, like put your money where your mouth is. That's what I try to do. So the last part let's see, getting away. All right. So if I need to get away, I've deployed my weapons, I've used them appropriately. And whatever weapon that is, guys, whatever weapon you chose, for me, it would be me. I am the weapon. I've deployed what I know. I've created enough time and space to get away. Where the hell are you going? Are you going to run around in circles? Are you going to run a mile away and realize you went a mile in the wrong direction? Are you able to call for help? Do you have backup? Do you have a GPS locator on your phone? I don't know, whatever you want to do. You have to have an exit strategy. The exit strategy is not just for the woman who's being abused within her home to safely leave. There's a reason why leaving your abuser is the most dangerous part. Because you have to plan it. You have to know what to do afterwards. Where the heck are you going to go? Again, if you've been aware of your surroundings the whole time, and this attack has come up, you've been selected for some reason, and it's happened to you, and you've relied on your training, you've gotten yourself to a place where you can get away because you were aware before that happened. You know where you are. You know where you can go to get help. You know what's around you. Are you in a wooded area? Are you in a park? Or are you in a crowded area? Are you like that woman who was attacked in the Gavin DeBecker scenario? Her exit strategy was to drive away, not just get into my car and lay on my horn. Get into my car, lay on my horn, attack the attack, get away, drive home, drive to the nearest police station. Drive home and call your lawyer. Okay, you've gone hands-on with someone. You've gone either hands-on with someone just with your hands or with a force multiplier, and you've created enough injury to get away. Understand the state that you're leaving that person in. They were actively attacking you until you created a stop in their action so that you could get away. Now what? There are legal repercussions to violence. Are you able to articulate what you did? Are you able to articulate what you did to your defense attorney? Because in order to call it self-defense, you need to admit to creating the injury. Another thing we don't talk about very often when we're handed tools of violence. You have to know. You have to have that exit strategy. So many things to think about once you've decided and acted. See why I'm a big fan of that observe and orient side of the OODA loop? It's tough. It's tough. You have to put your ego in your back pocket. You have to say, I know how to fight, or I know how to fire a gun. I know how to use a knife, but I choose not to, because I also know how to leave a situation before it escalates and protect myself. So you need training, period. If you've chosen to invest in self-defense, you need to train it, just like you would train any other skill. Training allows you to identify threats more quickly. So hopefully you don't have to use what you've learned. It helps you become less of a target because you start to understand what a target looks like. Because while you train, if you choose to train Krav Maga, you are not always the one defending. Someone has to be the attacker. What do you learn from being the attacker? Who's the easy prey? Who can I win against? You learn how to identify what your boundaries are, and you get used to sticking to your guns. You learn that boundaries are not for other people. Boundaries are for you, and rules are for other people. Thank you, Katie. You start to identify what pre-fight indicators look like. What does someone look like before they're about to hit you? Same thing with the process predator. How does someone act before they're about to isolate you? Okay. You practice using the tool of violence. For some people, punching, hitting, scraping, going nuts is not a hard thing to do. But then there's a bunch of us that are like, I don't know how I feel about that. You have to practice it. You have to feel comfortable doing it. There's a woman who trains with me. I love her dearly. She was part of a 6-week self-defense seminar that I did. And then she chose to come and train with me on a consistent basis. And not only has she invested in herself but she's invested her family as well. Both of her children train, her husband trains. And not only does she take Krav Maga, but now she's started to take jujitsu. She's understanding that learning these skills won't make her a violent person, but will teach her how to overcome that nervousness, that fear, to engage if she has to. You can't just boo-hoo that away. All the force multiplying weapons in the world aren't going to magically work themselves. It has to be here too. You need to understand the difference between self-defense and retribution. You have to be able to articulate if there was an exit and you didn't take it. You need to be able to say why. Or if you felt threatened and you pulled out your force multiplying weapon and used it, you have to know why. You have to be able to say why, and you have to know who to say the why to. Formulate your exit strategy. Start working after every self-defense scenario in class. All right, get away, get off the X, get offline. Where are your exits? Run away, survey, look around. How do you get out? You have to practice that. It doesn't just come to you. You work through your freeze response, like my friend Jackie, who, she's not by nature an extremely aggressive person, but she understood how important it is to defend herself, and she invested in the training. And then, you start to understand what weapons do and what you need to do to use a weapon, how to retain. At our school, we have police officers and air marshals and just a wealth of knowledge, way smarter than me. But they're there to educate, because we're all on the same path here that, if you really want to defend yourself, if you really want to keep you and your family safe, you have to educate yourself. So I think that is the end of that. This was a little bit of a heavy conversation, but it makes me very sad. That's the feeling I have when I'm articulating my my feelings. It makes me sad that women are sold things that could get them killed, or ideas that could get them killed, by people who they've gone to as experts or authorities. It's an uphill battle. And the good news is there are quite a few people who believe the same things I do. But as the consumer, you have to want it. You have to look for it. I caution you. I caution you on finding the easy way out. On this one, just do this one thing and you'll be safe. Learn this one technique, and you'll be safe. Because it's not true. So timeline. Being in charge of your timeline, the more time you have, the more chance you have to make a decision that will work out in your favor. If someone else is in control of the timeline, you're under their control, right? They've decided, they're acting, and now you're behind the 8 ball. So don't think about defending yourself as blocking. Don't think about your boundaries as something that someone else has to follow. It's got to be about you. You have to set your boundary. Someone crosses it, that was your line in the sand. Now you have to act. And when you act, it needs to be effective, fast, overwhelming, ferocious, whatever big badass adjectives you can think about. because it's going to take more than just one punch. Someone has chosen you. They made a plan. You have to interrupt their OODA loop now. And it's going to take multiple strikes if they're bigger and intent on your destruction. So when COVID-19 has passed, when we return to a life where we can have a physical touch from someone we're not quarantined with, and you are interested in self-defense, start training. It's fun too. Hopefully you'll never need to use it, but it is. It's lots of fun. It's very empowering. It's very, it's nice to know what you can do and what you can take. So I have talked for quite some time. Again, I'm going to get off my soapbox now. You can look forward to another Krav and Coffee that will dive deeper into weapons. Katie, you've been recruited. Will also be, so this is, I had said this in the beginning, but if you hopped on later, so I have a business page now where you'll be able to find all things self-defense. So Krav, self-protection, women's self-protection, mental health, physical health, so strength training, conditioning, mobility training, and getting you back to being that safe, strong person through physical therapy. That'll all be on Anne LaGrady Kirk, DPT. So you can find me there. I also have a website that I'm making more user-friendly, where you can, send me some information as to whether or not, are you looking for training? Are you looking for PT? Are you looking for, in this day and time, I'm doing virtual things. Obviously, you're all hanging out with me on a Saturday or a Sunday morning, virtual online training. Just having this conversation can start the process, can kind of get your, if you're an employer, can get your employees a little bit more aware of what's going on around them to keep them safe, keep them healthy. And so you can find all that stuff at principalmovement.com. I'm also collaborating with some pretty amazing people about a domestic violence and COVID-19. What can you do about it? Kind of talk. So a colleague of mine, Megan Horn, had started this conversation via a Zoom conference about when home isn't the safest place to be, right? When you're living with your abuser during COVID-19, what can you do about it? And as all great educational programs do, they left me with more questions. So I started asking more questions, and I started asking my friends some questions. And luckily, like I keep saying over and over again, I have some pretty damn smart friends. So we're going to be doing 2 presentations. One will be for the common person. What can you do to help combat domestic violence during COVID-19? The other one is going to be geared for medical professionals. So like I said, I'm a physical therapist by background. And one of the things that, one of the questions, one of the sparks that I had from this original Zoom conference was that healthcare workers are now frontline in the homes via telehealth. So if you are a healthcare worker or healthcare workers, and you'd like to learn a little bit more about behavioral patterns, questions to ask, who to call, then there'll be a Zoom conference specifically for you. Same thing for if you're not a healthcare worker and you're just, someone who's interested in helping the community, lending a hand. It'll be the same premise. behavior patterns to look for, questions to ask, follow-up questions to ask. Your friend's not going to be like, oh yeah, he punched me in the face tonight. It'll sound more like, well, how his temper is, and everyone's having trouble with, being quarantined. So if that raises a spidey sense within you, then here's a couple follow-up questions that you can ask. Or here is a pamphlet of information, online. Just some key things that you can look for, that you can suggest, that you can offer your friends, because they're isolated with an abuser, but we're isolated from seeing what's going on, right? So they don't have us anymore to help them because we don't see them as often. So I'm really excited about that. You can look for that in the next couple weeks as well. That will also be a fundraiser for the Domestic Violence Center of Chester County. So I will get all that information out. It'll be on my personal page, Ann LaGrady Kirk, DPT. So you can find all the information there. All right. I don't have many questions. Anybody has a question, let me know. All right. Well, if you watch this now and you have a question later, go ahead and hop on and write in the comments. If you're watching the replay of this and you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them in the comments, and I'll check back to make sure I answer any questions that you have. And you can also reach out to me via email at ann@principalmovement.com. No, it's principal like principals, not principal of the school. So thank you all for joining me on this Sunday morning, and I look forward to seeing you guys all next week. Have a good one.